Hello, David. Thanks for calling in.
Sure, Patrick. Drew Mariani last week.
Never heard of him.
To the break, spoke about before you went to the break, you talked about science and religion, and that's what prompted me to call.
Okay.
Drew Mariani talked about the vastness of the universe last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, and then he was going to have a guest on. That was the Navy pilot who saw the UFO over the Nimitz air carrier in 2004. It's been all over the news. And that brought me to the question, the vastness of the universe and the possibility of other fallen societies. Assuming that there are other fallen societies that God wanted to redeem, how can we differentiate that or reconcile that with Jesus being God's only, and I want to underline the word only, son? If God had to reconcile other universes, other societies from other universes, other galaxies, how could we use the word only? He would have to have some form of himself and some form of a trinity, maybe maybe the same Holy Spirit with another creature being similar, and he would be Jesus, Jesus' brother, but then you can't use the word God's only son. You'd have to say God's other son. So have you ever thought of that? Because I've thought of that a lot. I love the Shroud of Turin. I love to study the science behind it. And I just think about these things all the time. I know I'm not the only one that thinks about it, so other people must have had that question.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure you've heard of the great C.S. Lewis, not St. C.S. Lewis, but the great C.S. Lewis. He wrote 3 books in a trilogy on this very topic about beings on other planets elsewhere in space. One is called Paralandra, the other is That Hideous Strength, and the other is Out of the Silent Planet. So he wrote those books 60, 70 years ago, whatever it was, say 60 years ago. So if you're interested in his take on that topic, you might find those novels interesting. One thing we can say is that Jesus is the Lord of the universe. So the universe and everything in the universe is subject to the kingship of Christ. And in any person, let's say, who could be saved is saved only through Jesus Christ. Now, that would apply to human persons. All we know of, at least scientifically, all we know of is angelic persons and human persons. There are no animal persons or plant persons or insect persons. That kind of being does not have personhood because it doesn't have an immortal soul. But when it comes to what God has revealed to us, at least thus far, we know that like God, who is a person, angels are persons. They have an intellect and a will. They're personal beings, and human beings are as well. Now, if it should turn out that in the order of things that through natural revelation, we discover that there are other beings elsewhere who are persons, meaning they have an intellect and a will, then they would fall squarely beneath the kingship of Christ, just as everything in the universe does. But as far as the potential for them to be saved, there would not need to be any, if I understood you correctly, there's no like replica version of Jesus in their form. It would be left up to us to evangelize them if they didn't already know about Jesus. So this is all pure speculation. There's no way to know if it would ever happen. But if it did happen, it wouldn't change anything. And Christ's once for all death on the cross, nearly 2,000 years ago, would be the same saving action performed on behalf of those in other worlds or other planets. They too would be subject to the kingship of Christ. And so our job would be to evangelize them and baptize them, et cetera, et cetera. It sounds very science fiction-y, but it's pure speculation. That's all we can say. What do you think?
I knew Father Benedict Rochelle before he became famous. I used to go to his retreats on Larchmont, New York. And I went to confession with him once, and I asked him this question. And he took a deep breath, and he said, "We'll never know." So
he won't, because he's gone now. But maybe you and I might live, or our kids might live to see something like that. I personally kind of hope that we don't run into any kind of alien intelligent life form, just because it would be deeply complicating. And I like things less complicated rather than more complicated. But we'll see what God has in store.
Well, I have a feeling they're already here. And, we're just waiting. Pretty soon, we'll see. But
possible.
I'll take God's side anytime.
Absolutely. Hey, here's a thought, David. There's a great book called The Singularity is Near by Ron Kurzweil. And he wrote this book, I don't know, a little over 12 years ago, right around 12 years ago. He's one of the head honchos at Google, and he's a futurist. I think he got his degree at MIT, so he has a science background. In this book, it's fascinating. He's the whole point of the book is to discuss the rise of computing power and the speed of computing power and the miniaturization and the things that this is leading to very quickly, nanotechnology and various other things. So it's a very elaborate thesis that he's presenting in this book. The singularity is near. I found it utterly fascinating. But for you, David, since you're thinking about these things, I think you'll find his mathematical computation about the likelihood, the chances, the probability of there being alien life out there that's intelligent. And I'm going to give you a spoiler. He says that it's infinitesimally small, the probability. And he goes through all the calculations, if you want to follow how he does this. He says the likelihood of there being intelligent life outside of planet Earth is very, very small. And that seems counterintuitive because I think most of us, we look up in the sky and we see all these zillions of what we're seeing are not just stars, but galaxies that have, countless planets and stars within them. And then there's just so many more that we can't even see. It just seems so likely that out there somewhere, there's got to be some kind of civilization. But he says, actually, probably not. So if you're interested in how he gets to that conclusion, check out that book. The Singularity is Near. And the break is near, too. Thanks, David. I appreciate the call. The break is so near that we got to take it right now.
For more of The Patrick Madrid Show, visit relevantradio.com/Patrick.